A very good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of WRCB webinar series in which we interview scientist entrepreneurs to learn and be inspired from their scientific and entrepreneurial journeys. Today, we have with us Professor Rohit Srivastava from the Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Professor Rohit, of course, needs no introduction, but I cannot resist the temptation to say a few things about him. He has a long and decorated resume, having won many national and international accolades, including most recently being ranked among the top 2% of the scientists in the world by Stanford University, which is a remarkable distinction and a source of pride to both IIT Bombay and the nation at large. With that said, let's jump right into it and hear it from Professor Rohit about his journey and experiences. Rohit, first up, a little bit about your early days. When is your first recollection during formative years that you think you noticed the first inclination towards science and research, and how did you further those interests?
Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, Abdur, and thank you WRCB for inviting me on this sort of introductory panel. Let me share some of my initial sort of school days, and that will make it clear how I reached where I am. So, when I started my school journey, it was with students who had only two sort of disciplines in front of them, either engineering or medicine. And this was when IIT JEE was one of the most difficult exams being conducted in the country. There was really no comparison to any other exam. And all we wanted was to get into JEE. So me and my friends had only one ambition in our head, how to crack JEE. And for this, we took tuitions, we went, studied at each other's places, worked hard. But in the end, I was unlucky not to get a rank in IIT. So that was, I guess, my first stumbling block in terms of seeing where I stood.
Right.
That first sort of hit that I took, my I'll say perseverance, my devotion towards getting into an IIT became all the more stronger. So I said that, look, it doesn't matter. There are finally only 2,000 students going to get into IIT. And this was in the early 90s when, very few students got into IIT. I said, okay, I'm not one of them, but there'll be a day when I will be part of an IIT and I'll choose that path to get into IIT.
Yeah.
So science and research, I'll say research did not come to us naturally. It is something that builds on you. But to get into IIT was my first and foremost priority, for which I took a really, I'll say, a circuitous path to get into IIT by first getting a degree from a regional engineering college, then getting a master's and a PhD, and then coming back to India to join an IIT.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that, Rohit. On that point, there is a lot of discussion today about mental health in all types of places, and also at institutions where you think people have reached a certain level of competitiveness and mental resilience. But unfortunately, even at this level, you continue to hear of how students are suffering from. But there it is. I mean, it's a setback. Yes, you recognized it as a setback, but you use that in a positive way to inspire you to do things rather than take it in a negative way. And I think to young students, I think this is exactly what the way it should be looked at. Like in anything, so don't we shouldn't look at life as a binary, as a success or a failure. I think one quote that is attributed to Edison is that I did not fail 1,000 times. I just found out 1,000 ways in which the light bulb doesn't work, right? So that's the way to look at things. Thank you, Rohit. Did you have any scientist role models that inspired you when you began your scientific journey?
So, I'll say this, people who work in India, they have one role model, in front of them, and that's Professor C.N.R. Rao.
Mhm.
And, each one of us heard of him, we've seen him get everything, and till the day he got the Bharat Ratna, he should have got the Nobel Prize many years back, but that was, a factor that really did not deter him from working harder and harder for the country and the world. So if we have one role model in front of us and we see one person, who's really done what they do, there are of course other people who join your journey, and I've had the fortune of having been mentored, not in as a student but as a faculty member, by Professor Padmanabhan, who's the former IISc director. Have had the fortune of being mentored by Professor Manju Sharma, who was the former DBT secretary, and then the former NASI president. So there are people who make an impact, who leave an impact on your career, because all of these people show you how science has been able to transform lives. Once you come in contact with such people, once you get mentored by such people, all your life's mission is to see how you can make an impact for others. And that's what we've been doing, for several years now.
Excellent. So in other words, it's not just one person. There have been many that benefited you. And that invokes the feeling of that I need to do that for other people, just like I've benefited from other people. Right? Excellent. Thank you. So there is a saying that goes along the lines, the intelligence of a person is better assessed by the quality of their questions. And I found this to be interesting in the context of science. Right? Given the vastness of science, how do you select which problems to solve? What is your thought process for problem discovery? There are a million things you could be doing. Why these 5 or 10 things?
Yeah, see, depends on which field you are in. Let me take an example of where I am in. I am in the field of healthcare, and my biggest, I'll say, mission in life is to make an impact. If I want to create an impact, and that impact has to be for the millions of underprivileged people in this country, not outside. I do not care about whether my products reach the US, the Europe, and other developed countries. I care whether my products are able to create an impact for India and its underprivileged population. What I do is choose problems that these people face day in, day out. I do not choose a problem that is a problem for the rich people. Because, if I were to choose that, I would probably be targeting only 10% of the population.
Correct.
If I choose problems that are the problems of the middle class, the lower middle class, the urban class, class in which I am in, and people who are, I'll say, shoulder to shoulder with me, I can see problems much better, and I would want to solve those problems for these people, make solutions for them, and then make sure that we deploy those solutions out in the field, either through startups, either through technology transfers. But the fact is that we would want our products to be used by 90% of Indian population and benefit these 90% of the Indian population.
So this is problem solving under extreme constraints. Although you mentioned India, but interestingly, it turns out that when we solve problems for the constraints in India, it literally impacts 3/4 of the world: Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East, South America. So if something can be solved for the constraints of India, the benefits reach far beyond India.
100%.
Excellent. So Rohit, you've been a prolific inventor, having created many technologies in your lab. What is your research methodology? Once you have discovered a problem that is worthy of solving, how do you go about solving it? What's the basic methodology of it?
See, this is where let me give some advice to the younger faculty, and people who are joining their career in the beginning, who are just finishing up their postdoc. We have adopted a very different methodology for our lab. I do not handhold a single person in my lab, whether it is a postdoc, whether it is a PhD, whether it is a master's, whether it is a staff or intern, even interns working in my lab. What I do is give them a problem statement. They come out with solutions to those problem statements, and I give them a free hand. I give them a free hand in the sense that whatever resources are required to solve that problem and give me a proof of principle, and then later a proof of concept, I'm willing to pay for that. And I have project money. I have been fortunate to have project money, through government schemes, through private firms, and several other support areas. But what I have seen is, if you give your students, if you give your postdocs, your staff a free hand to do what they would like to do, let them fail at five of them. But if they are successful at the other five, you have five ideas which have turned into proof of principle and a proof of concept, and they move forward into funding for the next stage. This way, over the last 18 years, we have filed 200 patents now,
Wow. Wow.
just because every student has worked on multiple projects. They have failed on many. I'm not even talking about the ones that have failed. Probably we have failed in 200 other ideas, but the 200 that have gone forward are because I have given them a free hand. I have actually asked them to evaluate their failures and their successes independently. If they are able to do that, then I'm pretty sure we have trained them for every eventuality in their future. If we do that, with every lab in the country, and not focus on one project or one product at a time, I think India can be free of imports in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. I think the point that you made there about learning by failure is not necessarily, I mean, it depends on how you take it. I think we have distorted the word learning and mixed it up with the process of failure, and the negative stigma has been associated. And you also brought a very interesting point of how you've been fortunate enough to have a reasonable amount of funding where money itself is not a constraint. And I remember, particularly during my PhDs, when I finished my bachelor's degree, I went overseas. There was no stigma associated with breaking a machine here or there, consumables running out. Money was not an issue. And that is the kind of environment where learning happens in an accelerated rate. What is from the faculty perspective? Obviously, like you said, you've been fortunate enough that money was not a constraint. But to many, there is a constraint. I mean, would you like to share a word or two to younger faculty who are looking to build a lab that is thriving, that can build a culture like yours? I mean, what was the trick, or what worked for you in terms of raising funds?
See, one thing I will definitely want to say to everybody, who's in their beginning of their career, is do not miss a single opportunity that comes out from any of the government agencies. Today it may have become more competitive, but if
Mhm.
you are good at what you do, you will end up getting that grant. Very recently we got a DBT translational grant of about 1 crore, which is last week we got the approval. And this is just because I wrote that grant. I've been not writing grants. I have been going after private
Mhm.
companies to fund my research, because I personally believe that milestone based research has more outcome, for taking forward, and government based funding, we tend to slow down. We are not really worried about outcome. We are not really worried about whether we are actually creating an impact. And I'm not saying this because uh, people do it. I'm saying that because we are not under pressure to deliver. But if there are opportunities, one should not let go of these opportunities. At some point, you'll have to write 10 grants simultaneously, which means that you have to have 10 ideas simultaneously to move into grants. This is why I am saying, if you keep working on one or two ideas at a time, which I see most of the labs doing, even today, they have only two, or three probable ideas that they are moving forward. They have a dearth uh, of sort of funding agencies to go to, because there are only two or three agencies that they can approach. If they had 10 ideas that had moved into a proof of principle stage before they approached a funding agency, they would have 10 of these. And I know there are many. IIT Bombay itself has funding agencies. I'm sure you'll get to that point in a few minutes. But I personally believe funding is not a problem. The mindset is a problem, where one feels that one should not be writing 10 grants at a time. I have myself written 10. I have actually handled maybe 15 running grants at a time in my career. So I think it's possible. One just has to work towards that.
Correct. And it should just how writing papers is part of the process of being a faculty. Writing these grants should also be that part of being a part of the portfolio of things that you're doing. And I think the other point that I take away from what you said, Rohit, is that you could have the best science, you could have all boxes can be checked, And still it is, at the end of the day, the decision-making process of who gets a grant or not, there's still a little bit of probability in it. And
Sure.
in the event that you don't get that grant, don't take it too hard. Keep going and just keep reapplying because you know you're on a strong platform. If somebody doesn't recognize it, the next committee will, or even the same committee in a different context will recognize it and award it at some point in time.
Sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. So Rohit, in addition to being a widely recognized and well awarded, well published scientist, you're also a founder, co-founder in several companies. How do you manage to juggle between such diverse aspects? Because the world of research, the scientific mindset is appears to be different than the entrepreneurial mindset, which is more, with bottom lines and EBITDAs and fundraising and so on. How do you bridge that within yourself?
So, here I'll say that I have been fortunate to work with BIRAC, because BIRAC, the first time I was put on BIRAC committee was about maybe 14 years back when I was still an assistant professor. And this was Dr. Renu Swarup who brought me on the committee because she wanted youngsters to be there and be available for sort of more younger people to come on the committee. So 15 years of being there on the BIRAC committee, I could see the entire ecosystem in the country. The way research that we did was finally brought out in the market. And this has made us realize that whatever we do stays in our lab till we take that first step to move it outside the lab. Once we take that first step, whether it is our own students who do that, or whether it is a tech transfer to a large company which does that, or whether it is our own startups which do that, either of these ways, you will be able to then only move that idea or the proof of concept to the market. So once I realized that, I knew that it was only a matter of time before I had to set up my own companies. I had already helped about 15 or 20 startups, maybe more, 25, 30 startups. By the time I decided to take that plunge myself, and this was 2023, this year, when I decided I will set up my own startups. I've already set up 5 this year, and I plan to set up another 5 by the end of this year or maybe middle of next year. But what I would like everybody to realize is you have to have one student, postdoc, PhD, staff, somebody leading that stuff. It cannot be you. You cannot, Abdur, you said, how do I juggle between my academic responsibilities, entrepreneurship, projects? It's very difficult. If I were to do all this, if I were to lead the startup, and you've already done many startups in your career, it's not possible. I have to have somebody who leads that startup. I have to have faith in one student who is the front runner or the face of that startup. Once you figure that out, once that lab figures that out, then everything else becomes a cakewalk. And this is what I have been advising every lab that I talk to, every faculty that I talk to. Do not open a startup if you think you are the only person going to run that startup. You have to have a student, you have to have a postdoc, you have to have trust in one person to do that for you. You are always there as a technical mentor to the startup. You'll never be the CEO or CTO of the startup. So, one has to always remember where one's limitations are and let students take the reign of these startups. I'm not a business guy, so I do not understand finance, do not understand marketing, do not understand business, which is why I will need to have some of these people come into my startups and help us along. So I would say it's a win-win for everybody who joins hands in that startup. But finally, it is students who take that forward.
All right. So Rohit, you have had the experience of working with several national and international funding agencies. You have also been a founding core committee member of WRCB. What has been, what is your view of the role of WRCB in IIT Bombay ecosystem? Since its founding in 2014, how have you seen this evolve?
So, I'll start from the beginning. I think this was a terrific initiative, by Dr. Wadhwani, because this was set up around the time when bioengineering or translational bioengineering work was starting to get funded by agencies in India, and we were starting to see a lot of startup funding, a lot of translational work being done by faculty, by students, by individuals, in the country. And this was a welcome step for IIT Bombay. So I was, very, very happy to be part of the core committee in the beginning, because, I thought that what we could do for the ecosystem in IIT Bombay was make, I'll say, initial funds available, but most importantly, the connections available,
Right.
that comes with a donor like Dr. Wadhwani.
Right.
And this was the most crucial part, was because I felt that uh, initially we funded a lot of these small value projects, 10 to 15 lakh sort of
Yeah.
funding that we gave to many, many people. Even if 10% of those moved ahead, and I'll give an example of myself, Rahul Purwar, Sameer Maji, there are many of us, Professor Belare, 7 or 8 of us, who got funded by WRCB in the initial phases. And we were able to take that small amount and get a subsequently larger amount from, another nationally recognized agency, whether it is BIRAC, whether it is DBT, whether it is, DST, TDB, whatever it is, or venture funds. The point I'm trying to make is that you need that one catalyst.
Yeah.
And the catalyst was WRCB at that point, because nobody was willing to give flexible money. Every money comes in with its own tie-ups. You cannot spend it for staff, you cannot spend it for equipment, you cannot spend it for this. And every money is very difficult to justify. The spend is very difficult to justify. This was, I think, the biggest part of WRCB funding, was that it is a flexible funding. It actually gives you uh, potential to try out 5 different things. You may have applied for one, but who stops you from trying 5 different things?
Correct.
And in the end, you can actually take that one that succeeds forward into setting up your own startup, or even encouraging your students to set up a startup. But I believe that WRCB played a pivotal role in those times, because there was TCTD already set up by IIT Bombay. In that time, TCTD was not able to create an impact, and this I am very clear about, because healthcare side, TCTD could not create an impact. WRCB, on the other hand, created a big impact. And the second round of funding, I'm pretty sure, will lead to many, many more people being able to replicate what me, Professor Belare, Rahul Purwar, Sameer, Samek, Prakriti, many of us have been able to show. I think that can be replicated across 20 other faculty.
Absolutely. So, like you rightly noted, the initial pool of money that Dr. Wadhwani provided was for high risk projects. We never asked, where's the preliminary data? Happy to get involved at even TRL 01, and flexible money. These two aspects were very clear. So my question to you is, going forward, given that in the past, I think we should continue to do that. That provide that high risk capital at TRL 0, in a quick decision making format, and a flexible money. What else can we do to actually create large scale impact?
See, one thing that I am very clear about is the success of BIG. Abdur, what BIG has been able to do. I've been sitting in the BIG panel as chairman. I sat for about 5 or 7 years in the diagnostics panel. In BIRAC, I've been sitting, like I said, 10, 12, 14 years. What I saw was, even 50 lakh money, 50 lakh funding for a focus team is more than enough to move them from TRL 3 to TRL 9. And I have seen several, if I don't have numbers with me now, but at least sitting in the BIRAC panel, I have seen all these BIG grants that have moved all the way to TRL 8, 9 before they even approached BIRAC for their second funding. So I will say this: if we do a similar sort of a scheme where you have very focused milestones, you have very focused outcomes, and you want the faculty mentor or whoever, the student, the individual, let them come out with a product at the end of 18 months or 24 months. Give them flexible money, give them that 50 lakh rupees, but ask them to deliver a product to you at the end of 24 months. I will guarantee you will get at least 10 products in the next 3 to 4 years. And these 10 products will be high value products, because there are enough leads available. The only thing is, we'll have to sensitize the people who are working on these products that, look, we are not giving you free money. We want you to use this judiciously so that you can go for a test license with Sidesco. You can go for a manufacturing license after your test license results are through, and you should be able to get the manufacturing license at the end of your 24-month period. I can guarantee you there'll be at least 10 such products coming out if we do a focused BIG sort of funding.
Absolutely. And I think you touched upon it earlier as well, which is the point about sensitization, right? It is also a matter of perspective. I remember in one of the panels, Rahul brought this point, just like you did today. It is that as a faculty, we are mainly trained to look at a publication as an endpoint. But if you could do a slight mindset shift and say publication is a natural part of the process, it is going to happen anyway, but publication is not my endpoint, product is my endpoint, then the criteria shift, then your goals shift, and you automatically actually realign to the goal.
100%. 100%.
Excellent. I think there have been many, many points, Rohit. I mean, this is like a treasure trove for any young scientist looking ahead as to, how to think about problems, how to solve problems, and about mindsets and so on. In concluding this interview, may I ask, what is your advice to young scientists who's setting up a lab today, who aspires to follow in your footsteps and achieve the level of success that you have enjoyed in your career?
First and foremost, to whoever will listen to this podcast, is be sensitive to your own students. Your students are the building block of your lab. People are, I've seen people being very cruel to students. All they want is the students to deliver, not caring about what the mental state of the student is. So I have not lost a single student. This is something that is a matter of pride for me. 18 years, 50 PhD, 55 PhDs that I have mentored, 45 have graduated, 100 masters that I have mentored, 200 plus interns that I have mentored, maybe 100 plus staff that I have seen. Not a single person has left my lab because they were unhappy with me or the lab. So this is first thing that you do. Be sensitive to students, be happy with what they do. Do not expect too much out of them, and push yourself to the maximum. If you can take 50 students, I have always had more than 50 in my lab. Even today, I have 70 people working in my lab. I have never worried about numbers. Numbers are there to give you a benchmark of what others are doing. They're not there to stop you from going beyond. IITs had a rule of having 8 PhD students registered, right? And this has been across the country. I had 24 registered with me, and IIT Bombay could not stop me from taking more students. Even today, they cannot stop a single faculty member from taking more and more students. What I am trying to say is that students are going to make your lab. Do not stop taking students. Do not be sort of harsh on your students, because your students are going to finally deliver. If you are happy with your students are happy with you, you will find a lab like mine, where now we have so much that we are not able to take everything forward. I will need a second lab and a third lab to do or to complete what I started out to do. So this is something that I'll give as an advice to everybody. Do not limit yourself, because numbers are only for people who want to follow rules. That's
Correct.
all.
Thank you, Rohit. In fact, brings to mind the amount of time that you spend with your students is probably much more than what you spend with your immediate family. So, in that sense, your lab is your first family in some sense. And I think that's the way it should be looked at, and everything else kind of falls into place if that kind of mindset comes into place.
Yeah, but Abdur, maybe I should have also made this point very clear, is that in my 18 years of career, I have never worked on a Saturday and a Sunday. So I do not believe in a faculty member spending his Saturdays and Sundays in the lab, because his family needs the faculty member as well. Now, they are there for their family. Monday to Friday should be for your work. Saturday, Sunday should be for you. And this is how, US, Europe, Singapore, everywhere, people are very, very particular about not mixing work with pleasure. Once you do that, you're happy at what you do, and your students are happy because you don't drag them to the lab on a Saturday and Sunday, and they're happy. They're delivering much more than any other lab does. That's all I want.
So the students are free to come on a Saturday, Sunday, or you strictly tell them, no, take the time off and enjoy yourself?
They are free, but I'd never ever have taken any attendance of any student in my entire career. So I do not know if a student works for 1 hour. I do not know if a student works for 12 hours. I have no idea. All I care about is at the end of the year, what is our achievement?
Correct, correct. And you yourself, I mean, there's no writing. Many faculty would take the weekend to write some grants, resubmit and all that. This is complete family time, and that's what it is.
Nothing. I learned this in the US. Monday to Friday is your work. Friday evening onwards, I do not give to IIT.
Lovely. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. I think this is good. This is all well balanced because not only is there passion for science and methodology and a process, but also work-life balance that, you can be 7 days a week into that 12 hours a day mode doing only one thing. Then you lose a balance somewhere that you should also balance between your personal and professional life. Excellent. Thank you so much, Rohit. It's been fantastic. I learned so much, and I'm sure a lot of the young faculty will take away many, many things from the interview. On behalf of all the listeners and all the students and postdocs and whoever is listening, I would really like to thank you for your time today. And we look forward to having more such interactions in the future.
Thank you very much. And thank you to WRCB for the initial funding, and we hope to get supported by WRCB again.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. Thanks, Rohit.